Right now, we are in El Paso, Texas, and this is the BWOMS Podcast mixed with Zelene's live stream, and we'll probably edit some stuff here and there. Definitely a lot of tech side of things, but welcome everyone. I see people tuning in. That is awesome. Live Q&A. We are discussing Zelene's tour, the Tumbleweed Tour, as she said at the top, and of course her book Musica for Butterflies. So if you've been wanting to ask anything, confess your love. I'm just kidding. Confess your gratitude. You know, exactly. And a little bit of how it's been going, how it's the tour, and then some like maybe the other stuff like you said.
Sure.
So.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Richie, for having me and just helping out with the promotion of the tour and creating space. And congratulations on the ordinance yesterday.
Thanks.
The Barbed Wire Open Mark Series celebrated 17 years of programming in El Paso. And so I remember I was there those early days. So it's so cool to be back here and witness that. And so thank you. So I think the best use of this awesome privileged time is to have a conversation about the state of affairs of Chicanic poetry. And I know the intent for the Tumbleweed Book Tour, it's to promote my debut poetry collection, Music for Butterflies. It's also a wonderful, not excuse, but a wonderful opportunity for me to come back to the places that are my home, that have inspired me, that are characters in the book. And so there's that personal, spiritual, practical component of it. But I think the real resistance or push behind doing something like a tour as a just one poet is that I don't want to say I want to bring back rock and roll poetry, but I want to embody the tradition of the touring poet and the role of the poet as a prophet and kind of like oracle for the community, like you, the way that you are.
Dig that.
You are the oracle of the poetry community, and just being on the ground and passing on messages like corridos in revolutionary times, and having these pollinizations and conversations and alliances. Because, one thing I think we need to get into is the poetry and literature and academia, and how it's made it very difficult for poets, for artists, for writers to envision a future in the arts, in literature, without going through the conveyor belt of academia, without having to kiss ass to academia, without having to compromise their voice that sounds like where they came from, like the barrio, like their grandma, like their mom, And so much of Chicana poetry is mouth to ear, oral traditions.
Yes.
And so, and as is slam, as is like, beat poetry or the African American tradition that also stems from oral history. But also, like Homer and the Odyssey and all that shit, like that's that too. So I think as one, we have to, like, on the ground, we have to be, hey, guys, you can do this. Don't lose your voice. You have a responsibility to reach out to the communities, to meet the people that need to meet you, to make the ancestors proud, to make your mentors proud, that we are taking on the mantle and spreading the word, but, more than that is bringing people together and having conversations and alliances that politicians and maybe other things that have been co-opted by nonprofits and academia and the government and corporations to just kind of have really this anarchist spirit and creative spirit and create something new and have new conversations and create new paths. So that's a long-winded way of saying.
And we didn't even get to the intro yet.
Oh shit! Okay.
No, that's great because I think obviously this is you're really passionate about it. I think a lot of us are. A lot of our friends who are watching and listening are. And you mentioned punk rock poet, and I initially wanted to interject. I didn't want to interrupt you, so I waited. But I wanted to ask, well, what is a punk rock poet? But then you continue to answer it, and I think a lot of it is deconstructing the monoliths that can be academia, right? And what we consider traditional presses and institutions. And it's just kind of going against that grain and finding voices in our communities that is, not that. So I think you spoke really well on that. I was agreeing, like, okay, there you go. You answered my question. That was a great telepathic conversation there. I love it. And I definitely down to talk about that. I know this is your live stream that we're addressing right now, but for our listeners right now on the BWOMS podcast, can you tell us a little bit about first yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Who you are, and we already know, like, we heard it all, like, that's you.
Yeah.
But like, what's your history with you talked about the tour and visiting like homes, and so in terms of El Paso and BWOMS, and just give us a brief bio, like introduce people who've never heard of you, because I know a lot of people are being introduced to you right now.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here. I need to be introduced to you
in the best way.
Well, my name is Zelene Pineda Suchilt, and my stage name, road name, nom de plume is Rebelene, and Rebelene was born in El Paso. There was another filmmaker, artist, Mon, they call him Mon, maybe you know him. He was the one that called, yes, he was the bassist at for Frontera Boogaloo, and I came here for college to study at UTEP, and then also work at Border Network for Human Rights, which is where the show is going to be tomorrow.
Hold on, pause. It says that the live video is paused.
Oh, because of the low battery.
Oh, no. That's fun. So that's something we know now.
Yes. And
getting the power.
And that, was always, I was undocumented for a long time. And that's what brought me to organize, to be politically active. And yeah, so I lived here for 4 years. And in that time, I developed essentially like my style, my sense of aesthetics, my the lens of my politics and what I thought was beautiful, like my friends with the winged eyes and the red lipstick and the cowboy boots, and I remember seeing Jason Lucero's like drippy paintings, and so just all at that time, I guess it was like 2007, there was a lot of really cool things happening in the El Paso art music scene. And then in the poetry, I studied anthropology, so I wasn't in the creative writing program, but it attracted a lot of writers from, because it's one or maybe the only like bilingual MFA here. So I would meet writers from Colombia, a lot of Colombians, and other parts, and so I'm a little bit long-winded and kind of all over the place, but I think that's my connection to El Paso and how it just permeates the book Music for Butterflies.
It's beautiful.
I was born in Mexico, and I migrated to Houston when I was 8 with my mother and my sisters. And then I lived there. The founder of the Word Around Town Poetry Tour that ran for about 10 years there. And it was a local tour. So it was like about 14, 20 poets that for 7 days would, each night it would be a different venue, and it would be a showcase for those Word Around Town poets. And it mixed art and music. And when I left, other folks kind of took over the organizing and expansion of it, because I followed my heart and moved to El Paso. And yeah.
Why did you choose here?
That's what everybody is like, why are you doing here?
I mean, I get it. Like, I'm not even saying in a negative way, but I'm curious, what drew you in, or what was like the draw?
Okay. Yeah. I have a couple of answers.
Okay.
One, I think I was a huge Mars Volta fan.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that was the first time I had really thought about El Paso. Of course, I had heard about Juarez and just like, the mostly, negative connotations.
Yeah.
And I knew about El Paso, through at the drive-in and the Mars Volta. And I thought, how cool that it's like, Houston is quite segregated. And we had like a Chicanx Latin scene there, but it was very segregated. And then to hear kind of that, Pink Floyd, Malo, progressive, it just sounded like the future. And so I was curious about that. And when I started organizing with Border Network for Human Rights, started coming here to do trainings. And because I was undocumented, I had never gone back to Mexico. And so I had this very nostalgic view and romanticization of Mexico. So to come here, and I remember at the first time I came, the offices were right by Mujer Obrera, like right outside here. And seeing like, wow, they have like all the Mexican candy brands.
Okay,
and you can see into Mexico. And at that time they had like a 1920s Mexican artist exhibition. So you had like a little Frida, a little Diego, a little like the Modotti, and so I just felt like I felt so happy, so good to be able to be near it. And then also being involved with the immigrant rights movement, I felt like I'm going to be at the forefront. I'm going to be like part of the the revolution and things. And I came here, and then it's a city, but it's also a small town. I kind of got fired from Border Network for Human Rights, and then I just kind of like, I also was a bit promiscuous, okay, because I was like in my early teens. I mean, late teens, early 20s.
Like,
okay,
wait a minute.
No.
Okay.
So I'm just like, I have to get out of town, and so I did, and now I'm back. No, but and I have some of my best friends. My, El Paso lives rent free in my mind and my heart.
The best ways.
In all the good ways. And the cool thing about time passing is that now I'm gonna do my show at Border Network, and a lot of it's like family, and it's like it set me up for, it was a hardcore trial by fire training, but it set me up for success in New York.
And how has it been going in New York? I know you do film as well. You just work with a lot. How much of this was written spread out through your time in all these places, including New York?
Yeah, it's quite international. It even has Europe in it too, Naples and France. So in New York, you definitely have to be a hustler, And man, but like the truth is I had like $5 in my pocket, I had some friends that I had met there, everyone knows, all the poets know, like the Nuyorican is like the Mecca, right?
Shout out to Nuyorican Poets
Shout out
Cafe.
to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And so some friends of mine had a baby and they were like, come help us out. You can stay with us rent free, and we're sure that you'll do great. And I thought, well, I'll go there for a year. If I'm gonna have a service, industry job, I can have a servicey industry job. I bartended for a long time. In New York, I had $5. I bought some Chinese food, and then I just went out. My friend gave me like a little Metro card that was like unlimited for the week, and then I would just go to places and sell my jewelry and make a little bit of money. Called everybody I knew, set up coffee dates. Another organizer that I met at Board Network, Marta Chavez. She was up there working at NICE. It's an organization called NICE, New Immigrant Community Empowerment. And so she's like, well, there's no jobs. So we have a little like teaching, job that has a stipend. So I did that. And then that turned into a full-time position at the New York Immigration Coalition. And then it ended up being now 12 going on 13 years in New York.
Wow. Mind you, this is the Spark Notes version, right? If you want to hear the rest and more juicy details, you got to wait for her memoir to be published.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you've had maybe aspirations. Have you thought about that?
Yes.
I know we're talking about the first book, but I mean, I'm sure in the future you'd write a pretty cool.
I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. Mm-hmm. I think as a poet, you're always writing poetry. You think in
Absolutely.
poetry. And then in film too, right? You always have this cinematic thing. Mm-hmm. Just kind of like to go back to how do I get, in New York, I'll talk about that later. But the question about like the next book, or I do want to write like a longer narrative. And there's this awesome Texas writer who's also from the border, from McAllen, born in Reynosa. Mm-hmm. Fernando Flores. He wrote Tears of the Truffle Pig. It's like a great science fiction story or vision of the border. And it's like instead of like having narcotraficantes and things, it's like they're rich people are filtering extinct animals and having like these decadent dinners of like these like long gone things. But so I think El Pasoans would really relate to that book. It's a really cool book. And he talked about how he also had this kind of loose autobiographical novel, but that he wanted to challenge himself and wrote this abstract novel inspired by this 1920s movement in Russia or something. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, I should kind of do something like that. But then I also thought like I also know that there's merit in my autobiography. Yeah. There's this burgeoning immigrant narratives or undocumented immigrant narratives of young people that could join that tradition. But also I think because like when I was in Mexico, we lived in an orphanage for a little bit, and then just all the different cities that I lived in, and then I think most importantly is that political aspect to it. So I think that's what I'll do. I definitely want to play around. I don't know when that's gonna come out or anything. I take my time.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's great. Would you say that's maybe like the way you treat most of your creative process as well, including film, or?
I take my time. Because I think there's, especially now, there's an impulse to have content out all the time. It has to be pertinent or, like topical but I think if you read, if you watch films, it's like, it's all about the long game. And people burn themselves out. And you have to take your time. It's like, take your time, but it's important to have stuff out, right? Even if it has a couple of typos. And we're talking to people that are like, oh, I want to do this. And so I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to finish, I don't even have a bachelor's, but even people who can't read, like, they should be able to be like, if you can speak, you can write. If you can speak, you can tell a story. Even if you don't speak, you can tell, everything is storytelling.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be confined to a book or a film. Or, it's all part of the same source of creativity.
It's all storytelling.
It's all story. It comes from the creative source.
Yeah. Tell me about the creative source.
The creative source. Okay. You know about the chakras?
Loosely, right? There's different areas for them, and there's 7 or.
Exactly. You do know about the chakras.
I know that I live it every day. No, go ahead.
That's right. So there's 7 chakras that really just represent different aspects of what makes up like a human. So the first one is the red one. The red Power Ranger is the.
Is that where the Power Rangers come from?
Yes. It's like kind of like on your coccyx, I think, like your kind of your butt bone, and it's your tribe. It's your family. It's like, It's like also your base.
It's
your base.
Tool in your body, like, where you get your power from.
Your parents. Your parents, like, where you come, like, kind of all the things that you don't have any control over. And then the second one is the orange Power Ranger, which is the creative chakra, which is where creativity comes from, but also where sex comes from, right? Because when you have sex, you're creating potentially, like, an offspring or what have you. And it's from the same place. So when I talk about like the creative source or like being able to create things, is that it comes from that same place. And so art is first and foremost a source of healing. It has a healing property for the creator, and then also the receiver that can create, maybe some pleasure or healing thing to keep you from the pain and the suffering of. So it kind of comes from the same place. So like, rape and sexual assault is something that's super prevalent in the world, in our society, especially for women. But you have to heal that part so that you can feel pleasure again in when you have sex, when you make love, right? It's something that's been violated, but you need to heal that so you can tap into your creative source. So when you create art, if you're constantly, the world will assault your art. Well, the world will force your creative source to create money for other people, to adhere to certain things that you think that you must do. And so in the same way, you have to have your boundaries of, this is mine and I get to enjoy it before anybody else gets to enjoy it. So I feel like that's where the creative source comes from.
Who are some of your teachers? Like, and I'm not talking about traditional teachers. It can be, right? Actual people, actual teachers, but I feel like we also learn from elsewhere, right? Yeah. And you touched on some of it already. So I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit, because I do think it is, like you said, our ancestors, giving props to our ancestors in the same way. I think our artistic and creative teachers, it's worth giving props to.
Yeah. Well, since we're limited, I think I figured out that I'm part of a tree of the Chicanx literature tradition. Okay. And very old tree, and probably the oldest root there is Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. It's like they consider her the first feminist of the Americas. She was a poet, astronomer, philosopher. And so I think that's the deepest, longest root. And maybe Nezahualcóyotl, which was like a poet, emperor, king, god, whatever. And then I think I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sandra Cisneros and Lorna Di Cervantes and the Lorna's Mango Press, Mango Publications, and all the folks that came out of that movement and that time period. Burciaga who's El Paso, from El Paso.
I heard you mention the drink cultura
Drink
line.
cultura. Yes. That's it. Yeah. I mean, I think those are the main ones. And
So those are literary peeps. What about like maybe in other worlds, like in visual art or music or dance or?
Oh my God, my alter ego. Like when I think of rebelene or my visual references or how I approach my films, which are essentially they're poetry. They're based on my poems. As like Bjork. I like how she creates kind of this natural world in her music and in her videos, and she creates costumes and a kind of like look and feel depending on each song. Speaking of poet filmmakers, Saul Williams, I have a shirt. It's like Neptune Frost. Everybody should check it out.
Dope.
It's a musical. It's a poetry musical and science fiction. And so that has definitely inspired me this year with seeing Neptune Frost, of just like, wow, how beautiful is poetry, that it can be science fiction and musical and create this world of the future. I think, back in the day, it was like Anne Sexton, Maya Angelou. Those are the poets that I saw growing up that I thought like, wow, like you can talk about masturbation, like the Ballad of the Lonely Masturbator by Anne Sexton. Who else? Amiri Baraka. Audre Lorde, and there's just so many folks that I think.
Yeah, once you like name someone else, it reminds you of someone else, right? Tangentially related. I love that you talked about it in terms of literary tradition as a tree. I think it's a beautiful visual image.
And then we're just like branches.
We're growing up, yeah. Because I know it's not the same kind of thing, but when I hear the cannon, I think of artillery and cannons, and that's not what it is, but. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, like with academia. There's certain authors that you do read, but there's more to life and people's work than that, right? So I just love the tree aspect. We did want to talk about getting into film as well. Did you develop that later in life, like trying to get into that world? And how does poetry play a role into that as well? Because I've noticed that you've done film, but also related to poetry.
I don't know who said it, that it's like if you're a filmmaker or you're a director, you think in film, like you can think like your whole life in that lens, right? So that I think maybe I was born with that eye. And another I remember, like, in my family, there was always, like, a big camera taking, like, home videos. Cool. And we loved watching them together.
That's great.
And I was, like, a little performer, I was always, like, crying or, like, dancing. I was, like, that annoying, those... If you got it, you got it, those little kids that just want to be like, hey! And then... When I was, for my quinceañera, we were too poor, but when I turned 16 or that Christmas, I got a camera.
Yeah.
And a little TV, and I would edit like with VHS. And I would just take like dress up with my friends and just make like little movies. And it was before like YouTube, or it was like a handheld.
Yeah,
like,
I was gonna ask one of those that you hold on
with the little tapes and things, and so I when I was in elementary school too, we did like a one take kind of film, and that's when I realized how films were made. And then life took, different turns. In New York, the cool thing about it is I joined the New York Foundation of the Arts has a really cool community, especially for immigrant artists. And that's how I met Kevin Arota, who's my filmmaking partner. And he's younger than me. He was going to film school. And he just kind of like taught me a little, like we exchanged skills. A lot of it is just like trueque, this like, I'll help you with this, you help me with mine, or we believe in each other's art and we collaborate. And I think that's the only way that things get done in New York, or in general, I think. That's the only way, is collaboration.
Wow, I like that. Yeah, you talked the other day when you came to the studio, you talked about that term. And I loved it. So can you explain it to our listeners? Because I just think once you understand it, it's a principle we can live by more.
Yeah. So trueque comes from this. This is where my anthropology hat comes in. There's community or indigenous peoples called the Triquis in southern Mexico, and they don't have a currency, or like they were known because they would do like, if I have potatoes and you have corn, I'll trade you the corn for a sack of potatoes or something. And that's just that's not true. Like, that's an example.
Sure.
And so trueque is like, for example, I'm gonna give you, a lot of the times when poets meet each other, it's like, I give you my book and you give me your book. So we don't buy it from each other. We just.
I see so many poets do that too all the time.
It's a tradition.
With their collection.
Gotta catch them all.
I'm gonna have to get my book ready. Dang it! But that's great.
Definitely. We're all waiting for it. You can't underestimate or undervalue the lifelines that we give each other. Mm-hmm. How we help each other, how we give each other hope, how we listen to each other, how we witness and be like, hey, this is how I did this, or this is how you do it, or come on, right, we'll do it together,
I mean, it's how we thrive, in forming these communities. It's solitude and loneliness can only get you so far, but yeah, when we treat each other well and exchange and take care of one another, that's ideal, like collectivism.
That's what it's about.
I love that. We haven't talked a whole lot about your book. Now, to be fair, I just got the copy, so I need to read it, but I've been flipping through the pages, and there's a lot of cool little references I'm seeing and a lot of different subject matter. For someone who picks up your book, what do you want them to leave with?
Yeah. I think, when I go through, look for books or poetry specifically, I go through the library or the bookstore and I look at the poetry section, and then you do judge the book by its cover. But I think with poetry, different from, like, let's say fiction or autobiography, it's hard to describe the content. And you can have themes for it, and I think a lot of like academic poets will have like concepts around different things, and this book has a little bit of has that too. But one, it's that when you flip through it, and whatever poem you find, it'll grab you, and there is a multi media aspect to it. Mm-hmm. The first part of the book, Music for Butterflies, is a collection of 8 poems that kind of tell the story of this transnational butterfly, and it's a bit science fiction, mm-hmm. And that comes with an 11-minute EP that has a track for each of those poems with guitar and violin, and then there's some of the bangers in here. The Mango poem, which was written in El Paso, and Waiting for Sun, which is like the New York poem that have short films. And then it's in Spanish and English because it was very important for me for my family to be able to read it, and when as a poet, when you're traveling, that you can be like, I have a bilingual book, I can have poems will travel, and it expands your world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where's your press is based out of? You said the other day, Spain. Or?
Yes. So the publisher is Editorial Ultramarina, and the collection is Bilingüe Mar, which is their bilingual books, and they are based in Madrid, Spain, and they're run by Chilangos, Mexicans from New York, from Mexico City, and they publish people in Europe and Mexico, predominantly Spain, and then also Latin America, and they're starting to publish poets in the U.S.
Okay, awesome. Congrats on that. And
Thank you.
I love it. You were talking about book by its cover. In my other podcast where we read books, we always like to talk about the cover art. Is this an intentional collaboration? And if so, were you able to work out the artwork with the publisher and all that?
Yeah, so this painting was painted when I lived in Sunset Groceries.
Oh.
So it's kind of, I remember it was just, I learned to paint when I was in high school. I wish I did it more, but this is my favorite painting. And
wasn't this your Facebook profile pic for a while?
Yeah. It's I mean there's people that have magnets of this image, and like buttons that I printed here.
Okay.
And there was it was called the all female art show. Later on, Mujeres de la Tierra, which was like a I guess like women's arts show or festival, collective show, group show. And that year it was at Black Market, and it was up on the wall, and someone bought it for like 350. I'm like, I don't know how to sell it, like 350, and that was how I paid rent that month. So she was nice enough to lend me. I mean, I own the rights to it, but she was nice enough to take like good quality pictures of it, and that's what became the cover for the book. But I like it because it has these elements of like water and rain and nature, and then like this kind of like little bone dog with a devil on it, because it deals with a lot of like mental health issues too, a lot of like dark content, like suicide, and like obviously not my own suicide, but like people that I family member, like my little sister, half sister, that she was 13, and other people that I never met, but it's like it's just kind of this dance with life and death, that when you survive and when you make it, you're like, and that's why I'm here, and that's why this book exists, because it's like it literally kind of kept me in my lane and kept me focused as I healed from trauma or struggling with bipolar, and also like addiction and things like that, where it's like you kind of have to have something that gets you through day by day. And that's what I mean by the healing properties of art, first and foremost, before you make the announcement.
Love that. Wow. Yeah. You were talking about, again, to kind of go back to like the community behind it, there's an EP. How did that process work out too in collaboration with this?
Yeah. I think one thing I wanted to say earlier when we were talking about like, film and things, where I think in Texas, there's this crabs in a bucket mentality, especially like, in a community. I remember like hearing that for the first time, like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's like this thing of like, there can only be one, and that it's like everyone's trying to get out and will like get on top of each other.
Check it down.
And I'm sure you've seen it, and I've seen it, and it kind of keeps people from sharing their secret sauce recipe or whatever, and like kind of gatekeeping the information of like, how do you make a film, how do you edit, how do you make a pot, whatever. I think in New York there's so much of it that it's like you can't really be, you people are competitive, of course, but I think and then there's blue chip artists, right, that are like that are millionaires, and they don't, they don't have, they're the ones. But then the rest of us, we're just there growing and learning. And so most of what we learn, we don't learn in school, especially the application of knowledge. And so I think in New York, I found this really beautiful kind of community, and being attracted to artists where we do the trueque, right? Where I think with the Alberto Alavedra, who did the composition for the Music for Butterflies EP, he needed help editing one of his music videos. And so he's like, okay, well, do you have something that in mind? And I'm like, well, I have this like little collection of poems, Music for Butterflies. And I'm like, that would be the perfect piece, kind of, He came back, and I'm like, well, this is so beautiful. And the translator too, Carolina Sanchez, I did her poetry, her book trailer, essentially like a short film.
Yeah.
I directed it, edited it. I did that on that one. I did everything myself, except for, of course, her words. And she helped me translate the book. And Paulina Barrios also kind of helped, and we ended up being kind of like housemates. So it's kind of like this thing where it's like, we share resources, and it's not always monetary, but if there is, like if I get hired to do a show by CUNY or like a university, and then then I'll give the musicians, I'll pay the musicians and the dance and whoever comes on board if I have a budget, but in the creation of it, I think it's just like artists vibing and like embracing each other and collaborating, and then again just like the healing properties, the joy of the actual creation of the work. When is your book coming, or is it because you're so caught up with all the
That is a whole episode
okay
in its own right.
okay can I be the one to interview you?
That would be cool, actually.
Yeah, totally.
I've always been really bad about like committing my own work to paper. I perform a lot. Like I do more stage stuff than page stuff, which doesn't make sense. If you're a writer, you gotta write, and
Not necessarily.
I've tried putting it,
because the performance, like again, it's like we come from this oral tradition.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to like, books are beautiful, and it's great to have something to have like a physical object and to share. But also, there's something electrifying about seeing it live, and people connect with it.
That's how I feel, and that's kind of how I've been doing it. But I mean, I think sometimes when I try and translate that to the page, it to me it feels awkward on the page.
It's different.
So I appreciate when poems look good on the page and sound great.
Yeah.
On the stage, and a lot of that's just the way people read it and the performativity of it all. You are a performer of your work, which I really appreciate. We did the fresh cuts and just had the natural like stage presence.
I think there's academic or that are or just withdrawn poets that are not performers but have really beautiful work where the work grabs you. And then there's poets that are performers. You're the vehicle for the word, for the message, for whoever has to hear it. That you're almost kind of like an oracle, and you're the one that brings it all together. So I think we all have our own place, and we can, the thing is acceptance and embracing it. Like, this is who I am. This is my style. This is how I deliver. And, you know, I think I've also seen people do like one-man shows, one-woman shows from their performance, or, you know, leaning more to the theatrics, if you will, and do kind of like, you know, verse, like spoken word plays and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Dig that. So speaking on that, right? How did you decide to build your tour, and in particular the performances? It's very multimodal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you said interdisciplinary the other day. So, you know, I think based on our conversation, I can kind of tell why that is so. But, you know, what was the process behind deciding how you're going to present your book on this tour?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is at least 10 years of work, right? And like you, I was an organizer of cultural events, of political events, and filmmaker, doing video work, and then also a writer. So I think by the time that the book was completed, I had this collection of, or not, well, yeah, I guess like, you know, this body of work that included, you know, 5 short films, that, you know, I had memorized 3 pieces by then.
Yeah.
I had this EP, and so I'm like, well, I have enough content to, you know, I think organizing other poets or doing something as a community or as a group thing, that would have involved more. It would have involved funding and things like that. So, you know, it's a small press, and it's a foreign press. I didn't go with a national, like, US based press, because I wanted it to be bilingual fully. I wanted it to be the book that it is. And for whatever reasons, you know, each publishing house has their own guidelines and voices and audiences. But I very much didn't want to conform and settle to just having, you know, just doing one language, or it being or like doing 2 separate books. I'm like, I'm gonna, you know, as a poet, as a writer, I'm gonna be traveling. I want all my books and all my poems in one place, and I want to write new things, and I just want to put this out and let it go. And so, you know, doing that, I kind of, you know, all the first book prizes and things, I kind of like, that was kind of like a choice that made me ineligible for those things. So I couldn't really like reach people or have like a US distribution, right? But that was the choice I made because I had the book that I wanted in mind. And so, you know, and then and I also, you know, kind of going back to the academia and like this kind of like circus that we have to put on as artists, or, you know, any kind of creator or whatever, we all have to kind of do the thing, you know, this, you know the drill.
The song and dance. The moves, yeah.
And like, you know, meeting the right people and all of this and things. So I like I mentioned earlier, like I have bipolar, and, you know, from that I've burnt a lot of bridges, or people have misunderstandings of me. And so some of that song and dance, or that kind of what I lovingly refer to as like a circus, but not really, because it's like, it's, you know, we have loved ones, and you teach at a college. It, you know, it's not a shade by any means, but I wanted to, one, it's like, you know, in this world of cancel culture, you know, I did get canceled on Twitter, and like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to get into it.
I didn't know about this. This would have been like a whole episode. Okay, no, that's fine.
No.
That's
another thing.
Again, this is good promo for your future memoir.
Thank you. Yes, yes. You know, and like some of the people that are listening are like, oh yeah, I got one of those like weird emails of when you're in like, you know, in like a bipolar episode or something
Okay.
like that, or when anybody just says the wrong thing or makes mistakes or something like that.
People are unforgiving.
People are very unforgiving, or even like speaking of academia, like a typo, a misspelling, misused word or something like that. It's like,
There's this comic that I share with my students when I do a comma crash course. It's because I feel like it's such a misunderstood punctuation mark and most people guess. But I have this comic. It's Superman with an angry mob around him. And he's holding like a newspaper that says Superman uses your instead of your, like he uses the wrong thing. And everyone's like so mad at him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. Like, oh, Superman, he's been saving you this whole time. But he makes one mistake and I'll have to share it with you. So it's kind of reminding me about that.
I think a lot of it is like that, and then people then just kind of withdraw, or they give up their dreams, or they feel like they have nowhere to share it with, and that's really painful when your own community doesn't show up for you, or your own community doesn't like invite you in. When you think, I certainly as a young poet, I thought like surely like this, this other person or whatever would be there. And I think it's like you can't get caught up in that. You just have to like, okay, well, expect to do everything, So it's like one, as a community organizer, I know that you have to do like door knock one by one, talk, believe in what you're doing, and so I think this tour is to get my work out, get my book out, and then also, because I believe that the things that are in there, the mental health aspects of it, I think, or the immigration and the feminism and the family and the adventure and the sexuality of it all, like it's in there, right? But I think more than anything, I know from my book launch and from even the last show in Houston, it was like, there's people that went there that I had never met that needed to meet me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I needed to meet them. And I remember what it was like for me to see people doing it and how much it meant to me, and how the people that I admire the most or respect the most are generous as fuck. And then in 12-step programs, they say like you can only keep what we have by giving it away. And having the trust in the universe and in yourself that your dream, even though it's like not gonna make any money, you're gonna lose a lot actually, that you're gonna somehow get that back in return, and that it's kind of like a protest and a resistance to the tendency of creative work, particularly writing, being absorbed by academia and leaving out a lot of people that shouldn't be discouraged. It should be the people who are neglected by the school system, who don't know what to do with a comma or ESL, or they speak different languages or have a learning disability.
And
should
because
be
of that, they're made to feel there's something wrong with them, or they don't belong or fit in. And that's, this, here we are coming full circle from the beginning of the episode to now, which you're, I think, reiterating that earlier.
Yeah, one of the most powerful moments in my life and the tour so far was that, I've only had one show. I have a show tomorrow here in El Paso. Was my grandma just happened to be in Houston visiting my aunt, and she was she didn't go to school. She couldn't read or write, and she, as an adult, she would go to night classes and she learned how to read and write, And then I filmed her with with my phone, reading the poem that I wrote about her, and about her learning to play the guitar, like as an elder, and taking a bus, to learn how to read and write as a mother. and her commitment to learn for herself. And even though if it was like later in life, and how powerful it is that she was reading her granddaughter's book, you know? And then I'm just like, that's why.
Oh, that's great. I think that's a beautiful way to maybe wrap up this episode. I have many more questions to unwrap on Can, but that would be like 3 more hours of an episode and talking. But where can people who are unfamiliar with you follow, support your work online, and maybe even purchase a copy of Music for Butterflies?
Everything is in my website, rebelene.com, rebelene.com. So that's where you can find, buy the book, check out the films, read more about me. And then here in El Paso, I just dropped some copies off at Brave Books. So you can get some signed copies there too, if you're in town. And Instagram at Rebelene NYC is where I spent most of my social media time.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Richie. Thank you so much.
See you guys next time. Oh no, my camera slipped down. Why did it do that? I don't know why it does that. That's why. No, it's fine. For the BWOMS podcast, I'm Rich. That's Zelene, aka Rebel. No, you don't have to do that. We'll see you at the next one. Peace. Bye. Oh, that's you. Yeah. Thank you. That was awesome.